Here I am, someplace in the middle of Moscow. I'm not really sure where. I took this tram figuring that I was going to be able to get to the Museum of Retro Cars, but apparently I took it too far and I got to the end and it just stopped, and the lady conductor came out of the booth and saw just I was the only one in the tram, and she opened the door for me and let me out. And so now I have to figure out how to get to this museum. So my GPS is not really working very well. It just shows me a blue dot of where I am every once in a while. So I'm just going to kind of walk towards the direction of where I think this museum should be. And I'm going to have to cut through here, all these high-rise buildings over here. There's a lot of them. I'm going to have to walk through here, and hopefully I'll find my way to the museum eventually. So here is the outside of the museum. I finally got here, and I'm going to go inside and see what it's all about and see what these Russian cars look like, as well as other cars that they have in their collection. So let's go check that out. So here is the first room of the museum, and here is a small car, looks like an old British MG maybe. And this room is kind of the cream of the crop type car. So here's an old Rolls-Royce, and funny thing is it still has a Arizona license plate on it, so obviously they bought this from some collector in Arizona. Here's another old Rolls-Royce, pretty good condition, I would say. Looks pretty expensive. This next car I believe is a Cadillac, and possibly the one next to it. So these are old cars from, I guess, the 30s, 40s. Looks like some Bonnie and Clyde kind of cars, or Abbott and Costello. Here's another Cadillac. This looks like it's from the 40s or something. So starting from here in this museum, it looks like it's really high-end stuff, and not all of it is, but like I said, this first room is some really cream of the crop kind of stuff here. This classic Buick convertible looks like to be in great condition. So it's a Buick Special Riviera. So a lot of nice cars, but so far no Russian cars, right? Just British and American. Here's, what is this, old Jaguar? Two Jaguars. So yeah, it's cool to see, but I think people came here to check out what Russian cars look like, especially old Russian cars. But it's good to see these because a lot of the Russian cars are kind of influenced or actually outright copies of some American and Italian type cars, also German cars as well. As a matter of fact, Ford opened up a factory here in 1932. So Ford has been in Russia, Soviet Russia, for close to 100 years. So that's something I didn't realize. And here they got a picture of Ford next to Scrooge McDuck, I guess. I don't know if that's supposed to mean he's a cheapskate or something, or just really rich and kind of a Scrooge type person. I don't know. But so these are obviously a lot older cars here from the 20s, maybe 1910s. And last but not least, a horse-driven carriage. Here is the room with the Russian cars. And these tiny little cars on the left here were actually built for people after the war who had injuries and handicaps. And it was basically like a motorized wheelchair to get them around. And I guess they caught on with some people because they were small and cheap And so people, even without any kind of injuries, would drive them also. So here is some what looks like police cars of the time. And again, these cars, a lot of them are copies of Fiats and Fords and some other cars as well. Stalin liked the 1939 Opel Kadett made in Germany, and in 1946, after the war, they took the whole factory, they dismantled everything and brought it to Russia, and it became the Moskvich 400. So they considered that a spoil of war. They just took the whole thing and brought it to Russia. And that happened with a number of factories in Germany. So, and a lot of these cars weren't for the majority of the people. There really was a long waiting line for a lot of these cars. And in the 1930s, you had to win a national lottery just to get in line to get a car. So here's the scenery of, I guess, what life looked like in the 1950s when you had a car. You can go out camping a little bit. You got your little Christmas tree on the right over there to make it look like it's the wild outdoors with the little dog sticking out of the tent. So yeah, this red car coming up here on the right, to me, it looks like just a direct imitation of the Maserati Biturbo from the 1980s. It even has the little crown emblem on the back pillar there. So it's pretty funny to see that. And this car over here is supposed to be a luxury car, but to me it looks like a K car from the 1980s. And that was a Moskvich, and it was about $35,000 in 1999. And it didn't really sell well just because it was so expensive and wasn't that good of a car. It had a Renault engine and it was broken down a lot of times. So that was probably one of the last cars Moskvich sold, apparently. And here is a Chaika, which is called a Seagull. That's looks to me like it's a copy of a Buick from the 1950s. This green car looks like a copy of a Saab, an older Saab, maybe from like the early 70s or something like that. So a lot of these cars have their inspiration or just outright copy, but some of them are by license, like the Fiat 600D was licensed in 1961, became the Zaz 965. So also the Fiat 124 in 1966 became the Lada, and Russia even exported those to places like the UK and Greece and other places. So that was a pretty successful car for them, and you still see them on the roads in Russia. And here you see some of them, I guess, for racing. I don't know what kind of racing that is, but looks like kind of like a rally stock car kind of race with Ladas. And they even have these Formula One looking kind of cars as well. I don't know what kind of engines those are though, but. So here is, I believe, the Opels that they copied, that became the Moskvich 400, and these are the copies of the Fiat that became the Lada right there, the orange one. And here in the next room is non-Russian cars, and you see you have 1950s Vet, 1960s Corvette, and what looks to be like a new Corvette. Here's a 1970s 380 SL, 190 SL Mercedes, and some, I think these are what, late 60s Mercedes. And funny thing here is You have this customized, what looks like some kind of chopped Mercury that obviously came from California or something. And here in this little room is the Moskvich 407, which is a really famous car because it was built at the time when the Khrushcheva apartments were being built outside of the city center of Moscow. So people had an affordable car to kind of drive to their suburban apartments now. And here is old Cadillac, looks like 1968 or so, next to a tiny little Datsun from probably the 1960s. There's also, you have Volkswagen Bugs, and then here, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but if you know the history of Russia with Fiat, maybe that makes sense because you have all these Maseratis. And like I said, two of the cars that I saw in here look to be copies of the Maserati bi-turbos that you see right here. So I don't know why they have so many Maseratis in this collection. Here's the newer Quattroportes and everything. I would guess that the owner of this museum is just a big Maserati fan, and so maybe some of these are his personal cars or whatever. But yeah, they really like the Maseratis here and other Italian cars, I would say. So look, there's what, 10 Maseratis here? That's a huge part of their collection. Here is a more modern Russian police car, and next to it looks like a copy of the Ford Prefect, maybe. And this looks like a Buick. And next to it over here is another copy of the Maserati bi-turbo. Very similar. And the most interesting car here is this red one in terms of being a blatant copy of something. It's obviously supposed to be like the Lamborghini Countach from the early 1980s. But it looks kind of, I don't know, it looks almost like a kit car that they build on top of Pontiac Fieros back in the 80s or something like that. It doesn't look like it held up very well. So here's some old bikes and scooters as well. I don't know what years these were from. They look like maybe 50s or something like that. Coming up now is the last and final room of the museum, and it's just mostly older buses and trucks and whatnot. It looks, looking at these buses make me think of old Abbott and Costello movies. So that's got to be what, 1940s or something. So one thing I wanted to mention before I go is about Ford, and like I said, how long they've been operating in Russia. And I found it strange that I saw Ford Mondios as police cars in Russia and other government cars, but doing some research, it makes sense because they have factories in Russia that make the Mondio. So that explains why they would be in so many government uses in Russia. So that's my video on the Moscow Retro Car Museum. If you like it, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.